For those of you that were here last time, and I gave you guys one of these, I wanted to add a couple of things to this page. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just ignore the next 5 minutes. But the 6,000 years of human history that we were putting up, somebody brought to my attention that if you look at the 2,000 years between Abraham and Jesus, between Abraham and the end of Israel, these 2,000 years can be further broken up into quarters. Like you can cut them into a quarter here and a quarter here. So for the first 500 years, Israel was ruled by the patriarchs. For the next 500 years, it was ruled by the judges. For the next 500 years, it was ruled by the sons, the kings, sons of David. And for the last 500 years during Jesus' time, it was ruled by the priests. That's important. Don't look at me like that. That's because God is actually showing Israel, look, we tried it with the fathers. We tried it with the law. We tried it with the sons. We tried it with grace. None of it's working. At the end of the day, the only guy who can run the place is someone who is all for. So we're looking for a father, son, lawgiver, and grace man. That was one division. The other division was the 7 days of creation. Remember, we broke it up that every 1,000 years you have Adam, Noah, Abraham, David. But look at the first day. The first day of creation is where light and darkness were separated. And this, of course, is where death, where we lost our eternal life. So first day. Second day is where the waters got separated from the firmaments, which ties into Noah's flood. The third day talks about the land, which is the promise made to Abraham. The fourth day is the day the sun comes over. And guess what happens at the end of the fourth day? The sun shows up. S-U-N instead of S-O-N instead of S-U-N. This day, the fish and the birds got created. That's when you bring the Gentiles home. Basically all the leftovers. You understand? The Gentiles get invited to the party. Okay, and the last day, which is when man got created. This is where secular humanism gets to its peak, where mankind says we're gonna have our best show of running the planet without God. So the 6 days of creation tie into this overall design. I was just saying it might be interesting to add to this picture. Okay. So tonight we're going to be talking about healthcare from a biblical perspective and from a secular humanist perspective. Obviously, it is illegal to gather indoors for religious purposes. So fortunately, protesting is okay. So the official reason, if anybody asks tonight, we are protesting the fact that we cannot gather for religious purposes indoors. So let's get that out of the way. If somebody comes in and questions that, we just start breaking some windows, steal each other's Gucci purses, and we should be good. Okay. So talking about sickness and COVID and disease, we actually have to bookend it with death itself. The Bible talks a lot about death. It hates death. It starts off with a guy having access to eternal life, Adam, and then it ends. The book ends with the relationship reestablished where we don't have death, where there's no more death, there's no more tears, everything is going back to the original plan. But in the middle of these two bookends, there's a lot of problems. Our lifespans start off at 900 years. They drop significantly to Abraham's time, which gets down to about 120 years. And during King David, Psalms 93 tells us that the lifespan gets cranked back down even further to about 80 years. So today in America, we have an average lifespan of about 78 years old. And so I'm just trying to show you that that fits in pretty much exactly with what King David told us 3,000 years ago. Okay, so the Bible talks about death. It talks about the cause. It talks about the interim, short-term solutions, basically how to extend your life, and then how to solve it. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, once you lose eternal life, life is basically nothing more than a ticking time clock, where when it's over, you're going to die. Unless God re-extends, unless God grants you eternal life, it doesn't matter which of these laws you obey or which of these laws you break. It doesn't matter if you buy all of your apples at Whole Foods and spend $12 for the organic ones, and you could buy your underwear at Lululemon and exercise, and you could be a Japanese woman that eats the farm-raised fish. When your time is up, you're going to die. At the most, you might be able to squeeze it to about 115, 116. The oldest people in the world today are about 115, 116. They happen to be in Japan. Women in Japan and women in Sardinia have extended lifespans. But on average, we're talking about exactly what the scripture says with a hard set date of 120. These are world life expectancies. The interesting thing about this graph that I found is that, just look, the Judeo-Christian nations just happen to be the ones with the highest life expectancy. Buddhism doesn't get us good life expectancy. Hinduism doesn't get good life expectancy. Roman Catholicism doesn't do good. And animism and the religions that we have over here in Africa don't do good. So it just could be that the short-term solutions that God talks about will extend your life. However, again, an extension of life is not the same thing as saving life. Today we always hear the term saving lives. Trump, because he shut down the border, he saved millions of lives. And Fauci gets on and talks to us about saving lives. And everybody's in the business of saving lives. Well, the fact of the matter is that they're all lying, because all those people's lives that they saved, if you wait 30, 40 years, we're going to all meet them at the cemetery because they're all going to be dead. There is no such thing as saving life, except for the long-term solution to the problem, which goes back to that graph that you had, which is salvation. And that is determined by one thing and one thing only. Basically, you have to undo the mistake that got us in this mess to begin with. Disobedience of the Father is what brought us this curse on our head. And God says, I will extend your life eternally based on one thing alone, and that is the relationship you're going to have with my Son. Obedience to the Son it undoes the mistake of Genesis. And then things get reestablished and life goes back to normal. So this is what saving lives and salvation should only be exclusively used for things that actually save lives. Everything else that we're going to be talking about tonight is nothing but a death postponer or a death expediter. If you smoke a lot, you will expedite your death by 5 or 10 years. If you don't smoke, you might stretch it out 5 or 10 years. But at the end of the day, that's all that we're going to be talking about. The difference is the death expediters versus death delayers. Okay, let's start with the the biblical side of things. There's some pretty simple, they're broken up into sex, diet, hygiene, and social laws. These things, again, they are death postponers, but that bell will ring, even if you do all these things. Getting married, one man, one woman, these are what you do. It talks about eating animals, eating clean animals. There's a list of the clean and the unclean. Fasting is talked about as good for your health. Sanitation and hygiene is very important. Washing hands, taking showers with running water. The Bible makes a distinction between running water and still water. Circumcision adds to your lifespan as well. Sewer treatment plants. For example, when Moses was in the camp, God says, I'll take care of your defense and I'll take care of the food. He was raining manna from the sky. He goes, however, if I'm walking through the camp, and this is actually God saying, when I walk through the camp, if the Lord thy God walketh in the midst of thy camp to deliver thee, and I find an unclean thing, I'm turning away. So the sewage treatment had to be done by the Israelites. It was not something that God was going to take care of. That's something we had to take care of. You had to go outside, you had to dig a hole, you had to do your business, and you cannot be having any type of sewer within the camp. Now, these things are going to get more and more important as we go. Grooming laws, as far as keeping yourself clean, haircuts, whatever. He's very specific between work and fitness. You're not supposed to work 7 days a week. You're supposed to work 6 days a week. You're supposed to work 6 days a week and then rest on the seventh day. Weird things, like honoring your father and your mother. That's part of the biblical health plan. It says if you honor your father and your mother, you will live longer. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's what it says. Also, training children extends their lifetime. And then there's a list of absolutely things that you should stay away from: adultery, sodomy, bestiality, prostitution, fornication. Those are prohibited sexual acts that it says will destroy your own body. You're not supposed to eat bats, rats, pigs, oysters. Anything that's carnivorous, like an eagle or a dog or a cat, is prohibited because the heavy metals in those animals don't process as well as in vegetarian animals. So like an oyster, they say that an oyster is like the vacuum cleaner of the ocean. So eating an oyster is basically the same thing as taking the bag out of your vacuum cleaner, sprinkling it out on your salad, and eating it. Might taste good, but for hygiene and for long-term longevity, might not be the best dietary choice. I mean, I had a friend that says, hey, I got hepatitis 4 times, but I'm not giving up oysters. I'm like, okay, nothing left to talk about. Obesity, it talks about laziness, obesity, all these things will take away lifespan. They will remove time from your clock. There's also quarantine laws. You're not supposed to touch people with leprosy. You're supposed to quarantine the sick. Now, this is an important distinction because today, instead of quarantining the sick, we quarantine healthy people. And we use the same word, but it's not the same word, because when you take a bunch of healthy people and you isolate them and you restrict their freedom of movement, that's not called quarantine, that's called a concentration camp. Slightly different concept. Okay, also gives us instructions to not forsake the assembly of the believers. That's actually an important part of the social laws. Laziness and drunkenness and drugs are also mentioned. A little bit of wine is okay, but it says an excessive amount to the point where you get drunk is actually dangerous to your health. And doctors today will actually back that up and confirm it. A little bit of wine is good. You get to the point where you're getting drunk, and now your liver is going to get affected. So standard do's and don'ts for let's call it the MCP, the Moses COVID plan. It's pretty simple, not a lot, and not very expensive either. There's not a lot of cost in all this stuff, besides getting some plumbing and cleaning water and some sewer treatment plants. The rest of it is almost free. So minimal costs to the Moses COVID plan. Also want to stress the fact that the old age death rate, I know that the number one cause of the death in America is heart disease. Number 2 is cancer. Number 3 is respiratory problems. But I got one that is way more dangerous than all those. It's called old age. Kills 100% of the people, 100% of the time, for 100% of human history. Matter of fact, the reason why you get a heart attack is because you're old. The reason why you get cancer is because you're old. And the reason why you get respiratory problems is because you're old. So that's the cause of death. No, all the time. For example, let's say you're thinking, well, what if a guy gets hit by a bus when he's 20? Well, let's say that you remove the bus. What's going to happen 80 years later? He's going to die. It affects 100% of the people, 100% of the time. There is no escaping it. The only way you could escape the only way you could escape this virus, again, goes back to reestablishing the relationship with your Creator based on His Son, and then you will enter back into this bookend. That's the only solution. There's only one cause there's only one source of eternal life. And even if we find the cure to cancer, and even if we find the cure to heart disease, and if we find the cure to COVID, and we find the cure to all diseases known to man, at the end of that road is we're going to die. We just might die maybe a little later. But this problem is on our backs, and we ain't getting rid of it. It's like the IRS. Exactly. You could postpone it. Sometimes you can delay it, but they coming. They're going to get you. It's just a matter of time. All right. So that's the Moses COVID plan. Let's look at secular humanism. Now, secular humanism, we're defining this as people who pretty much, they don't believe in God at all. They think that humanity is the highest level of order. So obviously, whatever humanity decides is right and wrong is right. Over here, you have to submit to some 3,000-year-old Jewish guy he didn't have a medical license. What do we think? Well, how does he know any of this stuff? These guys have been to Harvard. These guys have been studying medicine for hundreds of years. These guys know how to keep us safe. And they don't have to bother checking in with this invisible being called God, and they just determine everything based on facts and data. So as an example, for example, of sex laws, I pulled up a New York, the city of New York. I figure they're secular humanist enough. These guys are, they're giving us their definition of how to have safe sex during COVID-19 times. Now, a lot of this stuff is actually R-rated. I think everybody's 17. Needless to say, we could zoom in on a couple of them. I just want to show the contrast between the way what Moses said do not do. Not only are these guys saying it's okay to do, but they're actually giving you instructions on how to do it safely. Now, where does it say? Oh, the New York Health Department may change the recommendations as the situation evolves. Well, that's handy, because I don't know what a lot of this stuff is, but it's gross. It's disgusting. These are the New York City guidelines for safety. These are the people that care about hygiene, okay? Because having sex with multiple partners, for example, you should try to have as few as possible, okay? Because that's safe. These people care about your safety. They love you. All they think about is you and your safety, and they want to save your life. And that's why they came up with the guidelines. Notice they're not laws, they're guidelines. You kind of, you could come in and out of the guidelines. They're not strict law. This Moses guy's a little strict, he's a little too stiff. This is a lot more flexible. Okay, what about dietary laws? The modern secular humanists, they have dietary laws. I mean, the holy grail is to be a vegan. If you're a vegetarian, you're holy. That's just, if you eat quinoa, that stuff there, 3 times a day, and you buy it at Whole Foods, and you pay $18 for that organic pack of seeds that I wouldn't feed my chickens, then you will be healthy, then you will live forever, except until you die of old age. Red meat is considered a no-no. It's not specifically prohibited, but man, they're starting to make you feel guilty by eating, the cows and the goats, everything that basically God says is okay to eat. Today, for some reason, is becoming sinful. So, sometimes you could eat whatever you want, but mostly the holier you are, the more vegan you can get. Washing your hands is recommended by the New York people as well, let's be fair. The mask, got to have a face mask. Face masks are key. Put yours back on. What? You got to stay. This is the key to safety. Hand sanitizers, of course. This is the solution. We have some in the back. You squirt some toxic. It's not toxic if it has ethanol? It is toxic if it has ethanol. The FDA has now since given us a list of 72 hand sanitizers that are actually causing skin cancer because of the chemicals that are in there. So we kind of have to update the hand sanitizing as we go to make sure that you're not giving yourself skin cancer. But these are the way to keep healthy. Do something really, really dirty, and then wash your hands, and then squirt them with hand sanitizer. Okay. Work. We're told we're supposed to work 6 days a week and then rest, but no, we're breaking work into 2 categories, essential and non-essential. It's very important. Things like marijuana and abortion clinics, those are essential. You can keep working. Things like haircuts and churches and gyms and school, those are not essential. Those need to be shut down for safety reasons, to keep you safe. You can stay home, watch TV all day long, get your marijuana delivered, and send the bill to the government. They give you like $600 a week just for the pleasure of not working. So they pay for the whole thing. It's very convenient. And then, of course, at the end, the creme de la creme of the safety plan, according to what we've been told by our media, is that we have to isolate, we have to shut down the lockdown, shut down, and then we have to vaccinate. That's the goal. Because once you get vaccinated, then we're back to be able to do whatever we want. You can have sex with whatever you want. You can eat whatever you want. You can do whatever you want, because you're going to be immune to everything, and you're going to be safe, and you're going to be good, and it's going to be great. All we need is to vaccinate, especially after we isolate, and then we can go back to normal life. That's going to be awesome. We're waiting for this vaccine. It's going to be so cool. Okay, what else? They're not completely divorced from each other. There's actually some overlap between the 2 ideologies. For example, the first one is the logo. Look at the logo of the American Medical Association, of every pharmacy and drugstore in the world. That's an interesting logo. And it's like, gee, why would they have picked a logo like that? Well, the funny thing is, for the secular humanists, they always have to go, in order to get credibility, they always have to go to the Bible. And this is where they actually got the symbol. It's from Moses. During the time that they were in the desert, the children of Israel started complaining about their carb intake. They started complaining about too many carbs and not enough meat. And like, why can't we go back to Egypt? And the meat was so good in Egypt, and I'm not getting no meat now. And this manna every day, and it's getting kind of sickening. And they started nagging Moses and God, to the point where God says, okay, fine, you don't want my protection? You don't want my providence? No problem. I'll pull out, and I'll leave you guys alone, and you guys could do and eat and do whatever you want. And as soon as God took off his protective hand on the children of Israel, what started to happen? Snakes, physical snakes, started coming, biting the camp and giving them deadly blows. Now, of course, snakes also symbolizes what was happening on a spiritual level. The minute God takes his protective hand away from Israel, the minute God takes his protective hand away from the church, you are subject to satanic and demonic attacks. But going back to this, on a physical level, what was going on is the children of Israel kept getting bit. They were starting to die. There's so many of them dying so fast that they figured, okay, this is because of what we did. And they recognize that it was their fault. They get on their knees. They repent. They ask for forgiveness. They go up to Moses and say, hey, it was our fault. We were wrong. You and God were right. Can you please go talk to God and see what you can do and broker something? Try to fix the problem. And so Moses takes the case up to God, and God agrees due to the fact that they were repentant in their heart, and he gives them this solution, weird solution. Where's my serpent? He tells them, take a pole and make a brazen bronze serpent, put it on the pole, bring it outside the camp, and if anybody gets bitten, they have to go outside and look at this thing. That's all you had to do is look at it. Interesting. You have to, with an act of faith, you didn't touch it, you didn't have to rub it, you didn't have to do anything to it. You went outside, you looked at it, and basically that told God, you now trust me, versus the complaining that you did last week. Well, you weren't trusting me. Now you're showing that your trust, your faith, and that faith will make you whole. And that's exactly what happened. It worked. The people went out there, and by the way, notice that he did not take away the snakes. They were still getting bitten after the solution. But now they had a way to solve the problem of death. You have a terminal bite, and now you have a solution to the terminal bite. You have a terminal lifespan, and now you have a solution to that terminal lifespan. But you have a terminal lifespan. You went outside, your kid was bitten by a rattlesnake, you bring him out to look at things, the rattlesnake bite would heal, and life went back to normal. Now, this artifact stayed with the children of Israel for a long time. It was like 500-600 years. Moses is right around here, and it lasted all the way up until King Hezekiah. About 600-700 years later, King Hezekiah pulverizes this thing and destroys it. You're like, why? Why would a Jewish guy take something of immense value? I mean, imagine how much this thing would be worth. You put this thing in a museum, I'd pay $1,000 to go see it. I mean, this thing would be worth literally billions of dollars. Why would a righteous king, Hezekiah was a righteous king, why would Hezekiah remove and pulverize and destroy this thing and remove it from the camp? Just as an educational tool to teach the new children about Moses and his history. This would have been a great homeschool tool to have. So why would a righteous king pulverize and blow this thing into smithereens? Why? Because something that was originally designed to be a blessing turned into a curse. They started worshiping it. They started kissing it and rubbing it and touching it and burning incense to it and putting the little candles to it, some big candles, little candles, big candles. You would think that, us Italians in Rome invented the art of idolatry, but we did not invent it. We perfected it. The guys who invented it were the Jews. The Jews, they take something that God told them to do, and then 500, 600, 700 years later, they turn it into an idolatrous situation. And of course, that's the one thing that we learned from the Jews, is how to take something that is good and turn it into an idol that you rub and you kiss and you voodoo the thing, you wear it on your neck, you light a candle to it, and of course, the bigger the candle, the quicker God will answer your prayer, strictly based on cash. Okay, so that's the brazen serpent. And my point to you is that something that used to be a blessing, for example, like our medical system, eventually, after you hand it over to satanic thinking, becomes a curse. And it's interesting that we have the exact same logo to do it. Okay, let's go back to the overlap between the two worlds. Our immune system, there's a lot of agreements between how to keep an immune system healthy or unhealthy. And as you know, the number one way to solve any virus and any bacteria is called an immune system. Now look at what we all agree, the left and the right, that hurts an immune system. Excessive alcohol consumption. Well, gee, who told us that? Smoking tobacco and marijuana products. Gee, who told us that? Not getting enough rest. Wow, seems like Moses wrote this thing. Physical inactivity, as in not working, or not going to work out at the gym. Carrying negative emotions. Now, over the last 3 or 4 months, would you say that society has entered a phase of carrying an excessive amount of negative emotions? Avoiding sunlight. This is how you destroy your immune system. You stay indoors. You don't get any vitamin D. You don't get any fresh sunlight. So ignoring personal hygiene, like why get up and take a shower when I'm not going to go see anybody. I'll just stay in my dirty pajamas, and why even get a haircut? Okay, just let it slide. Using toxic makeup and hygiene products like hand sanitizers, where there's the list of 72 hand sanitizers that you can't buy because they cause cancer. Neglecting the importance of water. This one is key. Why? Because God told us that clean water, washing yourself in running water, everybody understands the difference in running water and stale water. Okay, like a lake that doesn't have an inflow and an outflow is not clean water. It's not living water. You have to clean yourself with something that flows, because that's what keeps it clean and purified. So clean water and sewer treatment, we've already said how important they were to God. He literally says, I'm not going to defend you, I'm not going to protect you if you guys don't take care of your own sewer treatment. So the importance of clean water cannot be underestimated. We have a slide of a disease called, what was it, polio? And look at this. This is polio, okay? Now, right around the time that the vaccine came out, notice that the disease was pretty much already done and over with. Something else got rid of it from here to here, okay? So you have to ask yourself, is clean water and good hygiene the most effective thing when it comes to health in not only this nation, but in all nations? You want to help, if Bill Gates really wants to help the lifespan of Africans, you give them clean water and a good sewer treatment plant, and I bet you that'll give them much more on the clock than any vaccine or any medicine on earth, because this is the fundamental building blocks of life. You cannot have life without clean water. There was another thing that pops into my mind, Phil. Oh, let's talk about the Spanish flu. Look at the Spanish flu. Obviously, the Spanish flu, there was 2 big pandemics in the world, COVID-19 and the Spanish flu. Spanish flu killed hundreds of millions of people. Millions of people died. Lots of people died. And we're constantly trying to link COVID-19 with the Spanish flu, because the Spanish flu is dangerous, COVID-19 is dangerous. So obviously, this is, it's almost the same thing. But let's look at the Spanish flu. When did it happen? Right after World War II. So what happens after a world war? Your overcrowded medical camps, poor hygiene, exasperated by the recent war, no diet. People they're not dressed properly. They're freezing to death because they're not dressed properly. They're not eating properly. They're not resting properly. It's very stressful when you're getting blown to smithereens. And so your hygiene standard is at the lowest of all time. You're basically breaking Moses' laws. You're doing overtime on breaking all of these things. And of course, right after that, 1918, we get the flu. And what's the cause of death? A virus, COVID. Basically, yeah. You see, this idea of mislabeling things, it doesn't start with COVID-19. It actually starts with the Spanish flu. When I hear people saying, well, the Spanish flu did kill 500 million people. Like, no, World War I killed 500 million people. Spanish flu, that's like saying, you know, the fact that we invented lead, that's what killed all those people. No, it's the fact that you put it in a gun and shot it through somebody's brain. That's what killed a person. So once you start looking at the timing of the Spanish flu and how people were living at the time and what they were doing with their water and their sewer treatment plants, you will actually see that the virus is just a repercussion. It's just a fruit of a bunch of seeds that you've planted. It's not a random event. It's not that everybody's just walking around with peaches and cream and then all of a sudden, bam, Spanish flu comes, 500 million people die. That's the way it's sold, but that's not the way it happens. Okay, sewer treatment, clean water, fasting. Let's talk about fasting. Fasting is actually now starting to take off. But there's a medical clinic in Germany that's curing diabetes within a week or two with intermittent fasting. And people are just coming to the science is finally catching up to what Moses has been saying all along, which is going for a period of time where you starve your flesh is actually good for it. I don't know why. It seems like what happens is as your body starts to not get food, it has to find nutrition from itself. So it starts to eat itself. And the first cells that it picks are the sick ones. So it's kind of like a vacuum cleaner that it goes around and the weakest cells, the ones that have degenerated or aged or not, because aging fundamentally is a function of cells not communicating to the next cell all the information they had. Up until you're about 30, your cells reproduce pretty good. After 30, they leave some of the luggage at home. They just don't bring all the information over. Fasting seems to get rid of the slow swimmers. So not much argumentation on its benefits. And so obviously we recommend all of these. Okay, let's move over to, did we cover clean water, exercise? Oh, by the way, exercise. You know that if you exercise not enough, it's bad. But if you exercise too much, you know those gold gym meat guys, they have a suppressed immune system. There's high performance athletes suffer from this thing as well. When you push your body too far, when you violate the laws of rest, your immune system actually starts going back down again. So you can't sit on your couch all day, but you can't be working all the time. Both will suppress your immune system. Okay, so now we're going to look at the coronavirus because we have shut down our world. We've shut down our whole. Literally, World War II has not had enough as the impact that this has had on the world. World War II has not shut down all our churches. Corona did. World War II did not shut down all our factories, all of our airplanes, our transportation system. I mean, the amount of people that are being put into poverty, extreme poverty, and extreme poverty. The difference is if you're making $3 a day, you're poor. If you're making $1 a day, you're extremely poor. And 100 people have been moved into extreme poverty, and 232 million have been moved into poverty because of our reaction to Corona. Notice I didn't say because of Corona, which is what you're going to read in the news. In the news, you're going to say, Corona has caused this. Corona has caused that. No, our reaction to Corona has caused this. Our reaction to Corona has caused that. Because if you look at the numbers, Corona itself hasn't done anything. It's like an elephant. The mouse comes over to the elephant, and he jumps off the cliff, and then he blames his death on the mouse. The mouse was just walking by. If the elephant would have done absolutely nothing, everything would have been just fine. So please separate in your minds when you're reading your newspapers. Corona has caused, due to Corona, our economy has this. Due to Corona, the deaths have been that. Always ask yourself, wait a minute. Divorce has gone up. Suicides have gone up because of Corona. You're like, wait a minute. Is it because of Corona or is it because of our reaction to Corona? It's an important distinction. So obviously, the secular humanists want you to go from coronavirus to isolate and vaccinate. And they want you to go with one quick loop. They don't want you to do any thinking. They don't want you to do any analyzing. You go from there's a virus and we got to isolate and vaccinate. Boom. You got to get here and you got to get there fast because you got to vaccinate. That's the goal. Vaccinate is good and Corona is bad. And the way you solve the bad with the good is you got to vaccinate. You skip everything and we get to the point where you got to get a vaccine and everybody's bowing down at this altar and hopefully by November we will have a vaccine. But before, I broke the thinking up into several steps. And hang on a sec. Before I go and inject myself with some genetic modified organisms from who knows where, done by who knows who, let's ask ourselves, is this virus really dangerous? Or is it not dangerous? Is that a fair question to ask? I think it is. And now, obviously, if it's not dangerous, I'm not going to destroy my healthcare system. For example, a lot of our hospitals have gone broke because we told all our doctors to go home and shut down all their elective surgeries. So literally, hundreds of hospitals in the United States are shutting down. If you remember, the reason why we were told that we had to shut down was because we didn't want to overwhelm our healthcare system. We had to flatten the curve. For 2 weeks, we hold our breath, and then everything goes back to normal. So in order not to destroy our healthcare system, in order not to overwhelm our healthcare system, we just went ahead and shot it and destroyed it. So the hospital went broke. Now we don't have to worry about it being overwhelmed because it's not there anymore. We're destroying our world economy, not to mention what the U.S. is doing. We're closing down our churches, our schools, our gyms, our hair-cutting studios, our airports, our travel. Have you seen those cool pictures of all those airplanes standing in the desert, like billions and billions and billions of dollars of productive human capital just sitting there dormant because we decided to turn our airplanes into boat anchors. Divorce rates through the roof. I got a couple of friends of mine that are divorce attorneys, and they're like, business is great. I love this Corona time. They are very happy. Suicide through the roof. Extreme poverty already talked about. Small businesses are being destroyed. Notice it's not the big guys that are being destroyed. The Walmarts and the Amazon and the Googles and the Apples, they're loving life. They are happy. They can't find it any better than it is. It's only the small and middle class wealth that for some reason is affected financially by the virus. So we have to transfer all the wealth away from the middle class and into the upper class. So what you have one rich guy, and then you have 99 people that are dirt poor and that have to riot. Let's not say that. Okay. Promote socialism, large corporations. Of course, that's what you want, because once you have a few large corporations that control everything, very few people now have access to basically all of the loans, all of the media, all of our food supply, even our food supply. Have you noticed that seeds became illegal? You couldn't buy seeds during COVID-19. Now, what would a seed? If somebody wants to go to Home Depot, buy a seed, plant it in their garden, and make their own carrot, for some reason, that is dangerous to the virus. You have to buy your seeds from Monsanto, and only Monsanto will give you safe seeds. So we need to be very, very careful about anybody having a farm. Those people are bad. We have to be dependent on our government. We have to move everybody in our cities. And then when the global government mandate comes out, the vaccinate, we got the vaccine, we got to vaccinate, then, of course, we're going to solve the whole thing. And what we're basically asking for is not a national mandate. We're asking for a global mandate. Because I've been traveling. My wife's been traveling. A lot of people have been traveling. And all these governors and all these governments are asking, what we need is a global health authority to issue a piece of paper that says you are good to go. And without that global authority, you're not going to be able to travel. So that's really what this is about, getting into centralized government in every area of life. But again, we're not going to be these narrow-minded religious fanatics. We're going to be secular humanists. And there's no way that mankind, as at the top of the intelligence pyramid that we are, we would never do something this stupid over a virus that's not dangerous. Obviously, this thing has to be dangerous. So let's consider it. Okay, we'll concede the fact that it's dangerous. Even though, by the way, if we let's look at the data. This is the data of the total deaths of the United States, 2017, 18, 19, and 20, per week. So this is the first week of January, second week of January, third. So January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. January, February, March, April, June, July, August. January, February, March, April, June, July, August. January, February, June. Look at this. This is the COVID peak. This is why we shut down our world and destroyed our economy and did all that stuff on the left. Because of this little bump right here. And you're like, oh my God, look at all those people that died. We should have obviously have done that. This virus is obviously dangerous. But why don't we pay attention to another number? Look at this. There's a bump right here. It's called the flu season of 2017, 2018. Look at the difference between peak death and the low death. There's a swing of about 20,000 people a week from the worst time in 2018, from the best time of 2017, week I'm talking about, there's a swing of about 20,000 people. So the fact that 20,000 people die in 1 week more than before, is it a new thing? No, it's happened before. As a matter of fact, it happened 2 years ago. And by the way, if you keep this graph going, you will see that it's happened about 400 times throughout American history. It's called standard deviation. In order for something to be statistically significant, it has to be outside of the normal swing. This is how they sell us on global warming. Oh, look, it's getting hot. When I went to school, we were getting global cooling. We're going to freeze to death. Oh, look, it's getting hot. It's freezing to death. Global climate, ice age. What happens is if you're not understanding that there's a standard deviation, basically it's a flat line. There is no data here. There's nothing significant about any of these numbers. However, if I get you to zoom in on just this piece, I could prove to you that there's global warming. If I get you to zoom in on just that piece, I could get you to believe that we're freezing to death and we're all going to become popsicles. You see, if you by misallocating statistical data, I could prove a lot of stuff. For example, this is the absolute numbers of death in England. Look at that. There's a swing of about 20,000 deaths from 2014 to 2015. Why? I don't know. But what I do know is that we didn't shut down the whole world for whatever happened here. Look at the deaths of 2020. They're actually right in line. 2020 seems to be a relatively safe year. And yet they shut down their whole country, destroyed their economy, sending all kinds of marriages to the toilet. For what? Statistically, there's nothing here. So that's the UK. The one before was the United States. What else do we have? Do we have another one? COVID versus total deaths. Look at this one. Look at this. This is the age where people die normally. And this is COVID. You see the difference? What does this mean? What that means is that on average, people die at 78 years old. And on average, people with COVID die at 78 years old. There is no difference. Statistically, this is a non-event. It is exactly what has been happening since the beginning of time. Look, put up the causes of death statistic, the one that shows heart attack, cancer, and then respiratory illness. Look at this. Oh, 17.7 million people are getting killed by heart attacks. Remember what we said before, it's not the heart attack that kills you, it's the old age. But notice disease number 3 is a respiratory disease. It's the third leading cause of death. Now let's say that you scratch out the word respiratory and you change it to COVID-19. What have you done? You've created a crisis, oh, that's exactly what we did. Gee, what a handy thing. You've created a crisis out of thin air by just taking existing data and reallocating it. You're calling it something else, and now all of a sudden we have a crisis. But the reality is there is no difference between what's happening this year and what happened last year and what happened in the 10, 20, 30, 40 years before that. Except, go back. Except we have to wait till the end of the year. But like suicide, we're going to pay attention to this number because this one's going to go up in 2020. Drug abuse and alcohol abuse and stress from losing your job and losing your business, that's going to be a fun number to track. But we have to wait till the end of 2020 to get some really good statistics. Okay, so...
Those are going to be marked as COVID deaths. So.
Oh, yes, it's true. There was a guy that was wearing a mask. He was driving his car all by himself. And he inhaled so much CO2 that he passed out, he crashed, and he hit a tree and he died. And of course, that was COVID-related. It got booked as a COVID-related death. Who was telling me that they went to go get a test, you know, where they shove the 4-foot Q-tip up your nose, jam it in through your brain? Yeah, that's really good for you. Yeah, you should do that for fun. Even though the box of Q-tips says, do not insert this in your ear, do not insert this in your nose. But it's okay because it's COVID. Okay, so this guy went to get a COVID test because his wife was worrying about, I don't want to sleep with you if you have COVID. So he had to prove that he didn't have COVID. And after waiting in line for like 2-3 hours, he's like, you know what, forget this, it's getting hot, I'm leaving. 3 days later, he gets a notice in the mail saying that he was positive. They never got tested. The guy left. So another story, this is directly one of our employees who tested positive, and he can't come back to work until he shows up with 3 negative tests. So you show up, you're positive. Well, then you go after 3-4 days, you take another test, positive. After 3-4 days, you go up for another test, stay positive. So he had taken like 4 or 5 positives, and then he finally got one that was negative, and he got back to work. Guess how many tests count? How many cases do you think they squeezed out of that one dude? All of them. That one guy generated like 5 or 6 positive cases. So that's why the only statistic that you will hear about in the news is cases. Look at the cases. The cases are skyrocketing. The cases are going up. We have so many cases. We have to vote Trump out because of all our cases. But the fact of the matter is that the amount of cases is completely irrelevant. Because if you're measuring a virus that, for example, has been around since God's creation, like, for example, if you look at your Lysol bottle, pull that up. It says it'll kill coronavirus. A Lysol bottle from last year. It's funny. If you pull me a picture of a coronavirus and pull a picture of the common flu virus, you will see that.
Clorox tested to a bunch of frogs.
Exactly. Now, why you could have led with that if this thing is so new. Look at that. That's the picture of the coronavirus, and now put me a picture of the flu virus. Now remember, if it looks like, yeah, wow, look at the contrast. Now, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it does not mean that it's a duck. This is a new virus. This is novel COVID-19. It sounds real sophisticated. That way you get people really, really scared. Because if you tell people this thing's been around since God's creation, and the way to fix this is the way we've always fixed it, which is an immune system, then you can't shut down and do all the things you need to get done. Okay, so, but let's say that we don't let the facts confuse us. We are secular humanists. We need to vaccinate, and I need to defend the vaccinate position at all costs. So I'm just going to assume that it's dangerous. I'm going to ignore all the statistics that we showed. We're just going to assume and grant them the fact that it's dangerous. Well, then you have to ask yourself, if this thing is so dangerous, is it man-made or is it naturally occurring? It's a fair question. Don't look at me like that. For example, there are people in the world that seem to they seem to like genetically modifying stuff and injecting it into people. There are labs, like in Wuhan, that are CIA operated. Go ahead. Look at this guy. We all know him.
We're taking things that are, genetically modified organisms, and we're injecting them in little kids' arms.
Oh!
Shoot it right into the vein.
We shoot it right into the vein.
Things that are
Play it again. It's so exciting.
taking things that are, genetically modified organisms, and we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot it right into the vein.
You just shoot them right in.
Taking things that are,
genetically modified.
we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot them right into the vein.
It's awesome. It's awesome. You see, people actually get excited about doing things that a normal human being would say, that is absolutely nuts. Why would you interfere with God's design and start doing that? However, there are people in the world that do that. For what reason? Could be many reasons. For example, there could be a political reason, like 4 or 5 months before an election, you create a pandemic. Some people say that the way you get a pandemic is you get a bunch of Democrats to panic. So there could be a politically motivated reason to create a virus out of thin air, to actually create a dangerous virus, strictly because you have political ambitions. What about financial ambitions? Could it be that a virus? No, not that one yet. Could it be that a virus would take the stock market of the United States, drop it, and then shoot back, drop it by like 40%? Could it be that some people would actually do something like this so they could sell their stock here and buy it like right here? Could it be that there are people that will be so smart? And if you want to talk to me after the class of the people who did exactly this. But that, I would say, is motivation for creating something like this. What else? Financial motivation, political motivation. What else do we got? Oh, corporate and big pharma. Let's look at that. Let's look at the vaccines put the vaccine schedule. Look at all of our kids, you can't send them to school unless they vaccinate. You got to isolate, you got to vaccinate. These are the vaccines that we had in 1962. These are the ones you have in 2018. The list has swelled a little bit. Now, but it's your choice. Obviously, you can't send your kids to school. You can't send them to college, and after that they can't get a job because they're uneducated idiots. But you are free to either vaccinate or not. It's always your choice. Okay, so obviously the reason why I'm saying there's a lot of money being made off of these vaccines. Now the problem is that these companies, after they put tons of pressure to the states, like around the 1989s, they pressured states to mandate vaccines in their school. It helps with sales. What happened? A lot of kids started to die. A lot of kids started to get seizures and get handicapped. And they started suing the companies that made these vaccines. And the vaccine companies started dipping into their profits, and they started getting pissed off. So they go and they knock on Ronald Reagan's door and say, hey, Ron, if you don't immunize me from all these dead kids, I will stop making these vaccines. And Ron's like, well, whoa. We just finished telling everybody that if you don't get these vaccines, your kids are all going to die. We can't now go and say, we stop selling the vaccines because kids are dying. So what do you suggest as a compromise? The vaccine says, tell you what, when we sell the vaccine, we get the money. When a kid gets sick and dies and we have to pay him money, you pay it. And Ronald Reagan says, I like it. Let's do that. And they came up with a vaccine injury compensation program. It's a law. And oh, look, up to today, $4 billion have been paid out of this fund that the government has established to pay for injuries that are specific. You have to die within 2 weeks. Okay, very important. If you get the shot on Monday, you have to die within 2 weeks of the shot. If you die on the 15th day, you don't get no cash. But if you want to get paid, your kid has to either have a seizure, become mentally disabled, or die within a 14-week period. And if you do, you get a lot of cash. And to date, they've paid out $4 billion. Now, when I say they, I really mean you, because the American government pays this bill. This is a taxpayer bill. The companies that made the cash selling the vaccine, they couldn't care less about this number because they're immune. The immunity distributors are immune financially, ironically, but it's gnarly cool. Okay, so that's what we have with the VICP. Interesting to remember. What about military reasons to perhaps make a man-made? Could it be that we have a CIA that would genetically modify an organism for war purposes? Could it be that our enemies would do it? How many times have we heard that the Chinese virus, the Chinese have done this as an attack to our country? A lot of right-wingers are promoting the idea that this is a China thing. Trump even goes around with the China virus. And what you're basically saying is that either it originated in China or it was made in China specifically for the purpose of destroying the U.S. economy. You're a conspiracy theorist. Now, after understanding these things, I would have no problems believing the virus is in China because the thing doesn't work. If it can't, there was put up the picture of the 113-year-old Spanish lady that survived. There's a 113-year-old Spanish lady from Spain that survived COVID-19. And I use that as my example of this virus is so crappy that whoever engineered it can't even kill a 113-year-old Spanish woman. Okay. What about, so I think that it would be fair to assume that there could potentially be some military application, whether friend or foe. I'm not going to get into that. You research that on your own. What about a globalist agenda? These people that love a one world order where they need to take away all these national boundaries and all this authority that all these countries have. And what we need is one world government where one guy decides everything. And at the end, we'll just put one guy in charge of everything. Let's look at their agenda. One world government, cashless society, one central bank, one world military, end of national sovereignty, all privately owned property, end of the family unit. Look at how many of these things would get like a check. End of check. See, remember the seed thing? Check. COVID-19, I would say, has checked. Look, all of a sudden we hate cash. If you notice, we ran out of coins. I can't buy a Big Mac. No, an In-N-Out burger will not take my $20 bill. Even though it says legal tender on the legal tender is no longer legal tender. Legal tender is now bad. Cash has become an enemy world over. Now, why? Why would something as stupid as a virus have anything to do? Why would there be like a 50% correlation to advancing half of these causes for globalist purposes. But again, these are conspiracy nuts. These people are not reliable. We are humanists. Humanists fundamentally believe that mankind is in essence good. We cannot go to bed with the idea that mankind is evil and that needs to be redeemed. Because if you did that, then you start looking for a redeemer, and then if you did that, you start getting back into like the only book on the planet that talks about how to get redeemed and have eternal life. You say, well, what about the reincarnation thing? Well, yeah, reincarnation believes in eternal life, but what it says is that depends on how you've lived, you come back, as a cow if you've been really good, or as a worm, in cow dung if you've been really bad. I don't know about you guys, but me as an example, if I have to come back based on what I've done, I'm 51 years old. If I come back, if I get what I deserve, I'm going like 2 inches below the cow dung guy. So that's why the whole reincarnation thing didn't really sit well with me. Because by the time I'd make it up to cow level, you'd have to eat a lot of dung to get a sinner like me up to that level. So I wasn't interested in Buddhism, and we wrote it off right away. I needed a savior and a redeemer to take care of my problems. Okay, where did we leave off, Phil? Spanish flu, man. Okay, well, we have a virus. We've assumed that it's dangerous. We've ignored the data. We don't let the facts confuse us. And we've also determined that it is naturally occurring because we're not conspiracy nuts. We're not conspiracy nuts where it's naturally occurring. It has to be naturally occurring. Now, let's ask another question. Is this thing contagious or not? Because obviously, if it's not contagious, and what I mean by contagious, I'm talking about to normal people. Okay? I'm not talking about to somebody who's got, like the Bubble Boy movie where the guy spent his whole life in a plastic bubble because if one little bug flew in, the guy would be dead because he didn't have an immune system. I'm talking about to normal people. And by the way, old people are not normal people. Old people are not healthy people. Why? Because they're all sick. They're sick with the disease called old age. So the idea of a healthy 98-year-old grandma is an oxymoron. Grandma who's 98 is not healthy. She is 1 inch away from dying. Always has been, always will be. She's going to be really good, and we are going to celebrate her 100th birthday. Fine. Just pack it up, because before she gets to 120, we're going to be burying Grandma. It's sad. I don't want to be... The secular humanists say, you Christians don't really appreciate life, and that's why you don't fear death. Which is true, we don't. And that's why you don't appreciate death. It's like, well, no, we don't fear death. It's not the same thing as appreciating it. And then they say, you guys actually don't care about dying. You think you're going to go to heaven when you die. So you know what? If you die sooner, you go to heaven sooner. So in effect, you guys are into the speeding up of the death process. You guys are actually motivated to speed up the dial. And that's not true at all. If you look at all the biblical mandates, because the Bible loves life, everything that the Bible tells you to do postpones death, extends your life, and gets you on the planet as much as possible. Again, obeying all of Moses' laws. At the end, what do you get? Death. Perfect obedience still gets you death. Where were we? Is it contagious or is it not contagious? Okay, so to normal people, look at the statistics. 65 million people have tested. My goodness, 65 million people. Oh, and 60 million of them tested negative. You could have led with that, but that's not the number they show you. The number they show you, look at the bold-faced number. 5.8 million positive cases. Oh my God, 5.8 million. And what's the death rate? 9% death rate. And what does that mean? That 161,000 people are dying, and it just keeps piling on. Imagine if I start telling you this, that 1/7 of all deaths happen on Tuesday. And you're like, wow, let's avoid Tuesday. No, statistically that's irrelevant, because every other day 1/7 of deaths happen on that day. But if I give you a cumulative total of all the deaths that have happened on Tuesday, I could show you a graph that would freak you out. And after a while, I could scare you so much that you would literally wish for the week to skip from Monday to Wednesday. Statistics are very powerful when you don't put them in context. Look at this. Population the United States, divided mortality rate 0.04. Chances of not dying from COVID is 99.96. But this is actually not true at all. This is chances of not dying from COVID, assuming that you are part of the groups, which is old people who have pre-existing medical conditions. 96% of the people that are dying are old people who have pre-existing medical conditions. Remember, if you're old, you are not healthy because you are old. If you are sick, you die. If you are sick, you die earlier. So basically, what this number means is that you have to remove 96% of the 0.04% to really get to the point of saying, what's the chance of a normal, healthy person dying? And I probably need Pino to do that math. Okay, get on your calculator because the boundary will be 0.0000, who knows how many zeros, and we will be way past the probability of getting hit by a lightning bolt. As a matter of fact, the danger of getting killed on the way driving over to the Q-tip, shoving up your nose test, the chances of you dying in your car, going to get your Q-tip test is higher than the chances of you, I'm talking about a normal, healthy person who's not old, who does not have pre-existing medical conditions. A normal person driving to the Q-tip test is getting more danger than actually COVID has ever indicated. What else? Ooh, look at this. These are the people that are dying. Look at this. The people that are dying seem to be 60 to 80 plus. Gee, in order to have 78-year-old average of death, don't you see that in order to get a 78-year-old average, there's a couple people that make it to 88. And for every guy that makes it to 88, there's a guy that died at 68. So obviously there's a little bit of the curve that's before this number, and there's a little bit of the curve that's after this number. And that's exactly what we see. Oh, but look, there's an 18 to 34-year-old. There's a little sliver. Look at this 18 and 34-year-old guy. He died. He died of COVID. Really? Go look at him. HIV, immunocompromised, cancer. He's on his 5th rounds of chemotherapy, which destroy your immune system. Every one of those young cases, if you look at them, you will see that there's another, and it might not even be an underlying medical condition. For example, if you have HIV and you are on ART drugs, you don't test positive for the virus anymore. So technically, you don't have an pre-existing medical condition. But that's a bunch of junk. Because you have HIV, you're pumping yourself full of drugs every single day. Your immune system is on the fritz. And if you look at the statistics of what's going on, HIV deaths are all of a sudden dropping almost by the same percentage that the COVID deaths are increasing within the age group of people like 20 to 30. So my point is that by the time you remove HIV and immunocompromised and cancerous people from this blue category, all that's left is the green. And what is the green? 65 and over. What happens to 65-year-old people? They end up dying. That's what's always happened to them. That's what will always happen to them, and that's what will continue happening. Statistically, these deaths mean absolutely nothing. But we have a virus. We have to assume that it's contagious, that it's dangerous. It is naturally occurring. We're not conspiracy fools. We're going to assume that it's contagious to the average bear, even though there's no evidence of it. And now we have to ask ourselves, it's a fair question, is it preventable or not? Let's just assume that all this stuff is the way they say it. You have to ask yourself, is there anything you can do about it? Because it could be that this virus is so contagious that there's no way to slow it down. In fact, that's what they told us at the beginning. We're not going to, there's no way that everybody's not going to get it. Everybody's going to get it. We just want to bend the curve. We want to slow it down because eventually everybody's going to get it. It's impossible to hold back. We were told that was a non-preventable disease. In which case, why don't we do like Belarus did? Tell everybody, get a shot of vodka and go back to work. The whole country took that approach. Now, Lukashenko, of course, after that became a terrorist. Every time somebody speaks, well, we say our side of the equation, politically he gets annihilated. But let's look at the Belarus numbers. How ridiculous would they be for a guy to say, drink a shot of vodka and go back to work? And if you look at the deaths of Belarus, it's pretty much exactly the same as every other country in Europe. There's statistically, again, no difference between Belarus and the other European countries. Okay, so we're just going to have to assume again that it is preventable, because the fact of it not being preventable would obviously mean that shutting down our universe and causing all this mayhem and destruction for something that's not preventable anyway would be silly. So we have to assume that it's preventable. And then, of course, you have to ask yourself, is it something that we know how to prevent? Or is it something that we don't know how to prevent? Because, for example, if we don't know how to prevent it, we just start doing stupid things at random, hoping that something sticks. Play the Fauci video.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it, because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with
No reason.
When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet, but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. And often, there are unintended consequences. People keep fiddling with the mask and they keep touching their thing.
Now, even a broken clock will get it right twice a day. That's the first thing the guy said that actually made sense. Okay, why am I bringing this up? Because if you listen to him today, the story has changed completely. Masks are now essential. Masks are now, they're not as golden as the vaccinate, but it's definitely top 10. I can't go buy milk if I don't wear a mask. The guy came chasing me down. Excuse me, sir, you don't have a mask. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Okay, just try to be polite. I didn't know what to do. See, as a loving person, you have to care about others. However, at the same time, part of being loving is not exasperating an irrational fear. So when you go around with a mask, what you're telling everybody around you is that there's a danger. If that danger is not real, you're lying. So it's actually unloving to wear a mask. However, it's very, very complex. Because this is like when Jesus came up to the tax collector and says, hey, you got to pay your taxes. And Jesus is like, okay, go get the fish, get the gold coin, and pay the guy. There's a time for civil disobedience, and there's a time for civil obedience. And it's a delicate line underneath the law of love. If you are a church today, for example, are you going to stay open? Are you going to stay open and have your meetings outdoors? Or are you just going to go online and shut down altogether? Those decisions get altered. Are you going to wear a mask when you go into Costco? Or are you going to start pitching a fuss and create? I think as a Christian, you have to be very, very sensitive to, if I don't wear a mask, what am I going to communicate to this guy? We've been talking now for what, over an hour? And we've put a lot of information. You ain't going to communicate all this information by walking in with no mask and then telling somebody to F off if they tell you to wear one. That's not going to work. The only thing you're going to do is anger them, and they're going to chalk you up as one of those weirdos who doesn't want to vaccinate and is going to endanger grandma. Is going to kill grandma because we don't wear a mask. Okay, so we're going to assume that there's a virus and it's dangerous, it's naturally occurring. We're going to assume that it's contagious. We're going to assume that it's preventable, and we're going to absolutely assume that we know how, who's getting affected, and why. Now, of course, when you know who and why, you would think that we could just separate the people who are not in danger, put them over there, let them go back to work, and just deal with the ones that are in danger. Math would kind of say, if you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. For example, that's what Sweden did. Sweden says, you know what, it seems to be dangerous, but you know what? It seems to be only dangerous to grandma that has a pre-existing medical condition. So tell you what, let's get the grandmas and the grandpas that have pre-existing medical conditions. We leave them at home, which they are anyway, since they're all retired. And everybody else goes back to work. The population that is between 20 and 55 years old, which happens to be the most productive age range, which happens to actually make the food and the electricity that grandma needs to live, we keep them working. Sweden, those nut jobs. And now look at these terrorists. Let's look at the numbers of Sweden. Obviously, they must be killing grandmas left and right? Except, this one's good. Let's zoom in on this one. Predictions of what's going to happen to the ICUs, intensive care. These are the predictions of all the people that are going to rush into the Swedish hospital. This is the prediction, best case, worst case scenario, probable scenario, best case scenario. The blue is actual. Okay? There's a guy who works at a hospital over here. This guy over here works at a hospital in San Clemente. If you guys want to know about the statistics of ICU, how many deaths there have been in the hospital, the fact that it's been overwhelmed, that we had to bring these two gigantic ships. Put a picture of those ships. They were called the Mercy and the Comfort. What an ironic, blasphemous name. You call these things the name of the Holy Spirit. You bring on a big white ship. You park one in New York, and you park one in Los Angeles. Because of the overwhelming disaster. Yeah, there it is. Look at that thing. Red Cross. Because the hospitals are going to get overwhelmed. And you know what happened after 2 weeks? The captain got so bored and doing absolutely nothing that the thing went, we sent the thing home. Totally vacant. What else do we have? Do we have any more graphs for Sweden to show that Sweden's life? Oh, look at that. He's right in line with all the other countries around. Now, what you're going to hear is Sweden's death rate is higher than Iran's. That's what you'll hear. They won't tell you that, yeah, it's higher than Iran's, and it's a little bit less than Belgium. Basically, when you chart them all out, it's insignificantly different. There is no difference between the death rates of Sweden and every other European country. And what did they do? Nothing. They kept their barber shop open. They kept their hotels open. They kept everything open. As a matter of fact, I tried to buy a Volvo. They said, oh, we're selling Volvos so much, you got to wait till next year to buy one. I can't even do a European delivery on a Volvo. I was so disappointed. Sweden COVID-19 death rate is lower than Spain, Italy, and the UK, despite never having a lockdown. You could have led with that. Wouldn't that have been an interesting thing to lead with when you were considering whether to lock down the world or not? Why are Sweden's coronavirus figures falling so sharply, and what does it mean for the future? What it means for the future is that if you shut down your country, you're a dummy. And you should have followed their examples, but of course, we're going to have to find something they did wrong so we can crucify it. Oh, now what they're saying is Sweden's economy has also been affected. You know why? Because America stopped buying their stuff. Because Russia and all the rest of the world stopped buying. We all shut down our economies, which in turn affected theirs. So it's true, their GDP has dropped. But it hasn't dropped because of COVID. It hasn't dropped because of what they did. It has dropped because they lost all their customers. Their customers stopped buying their products for no good reason whatsoever. Okay, where are we? We got a virus. It's dangerous. We've proven that it's naturally occurring. We've assumed that it's contagious. We've ignored all the data to show that it's preventable. We know exactly how, why, and who. And now we have to obviously take care of the people that are in danger. We have to implement safety protocols. We have to isolate. We have to vaccinate. We got to lock down, torch down. Now, you got a choice. You got to ask yourself, are we going to do this by will, free will, or are we going to do it by force? It's a fair question. By force or by free will? For example, breaking into somebody's store and stealing the Gucci purse is technically illegal, but we let it happen. Why? It wasn't worth the fight. The cost, the police officers figured out that by the time I start fighting with this whole riotous gang in LA and start shooting people, the more I'm going to shoot them, the more they figured the cost of fighting and doing this by force is not worth the price of admission. So they just let it happen. They basically let it self-govern. It's like going to people and saying, guys, we understand that you should lock down your business, but you know what? We really can't enforce it because it's impossible to enforce. Like that, you know, the haircutting lady that's sneaking people in from the back. When you tell somebody not to cut hair, and everybody's going around with hair that's perfectly cut, especially Newsom. That dude's got a sweet haircut. It's a little strange that we don't want to get political. It's a little strange when the cause, you actually have to calculate how many police officers are going to die to save a couple of Gucci purses. Let Beverly Hills burn down, and then we'll just fix it tomorrow. It'll be cheaper to fix it than to go in there and actually use military or police force. So they.
The company that owns Gucci and all the brands said they lost less money in the riots than normal theft.
There you go.
But
So
if they would have been open, they have regular theft every day. So their numbers actually were the same.
there's a cost to enforcing something. For example, let's say that you want to vaccinate a guy like me. Dude, you're going to have to strap me down. You're going to have to get a gun and come into my house. You're probably going to have to pass. You have to knock me out because I'm going to kick and struggle. You can't get a needle in. You're going to have to spend a tremendous amount of money to inject a dude like me. It might cost you $5,000, $6,000. You might think, you know what? We don't have that kind of money. Let's just let it slide. So you have to ask yourself, what is the cost of forcing these lockdowns? Now, of course, when I mean by forcing, if you don't allow me to buy food, that's the equivalent of forcing. If you don't allow me to educate my kids, if you don't allow me to open up my business, I consider that exactly the same as coming in with a gunpoint from a police officer from the military. There is no distinction. When you reduce my ability to work or to earn or to live, in essence, you are using deadly force. And that's the only reason why my businesses are shut down. I assure you, every single one of my businesses is shut down. It's because somebody put a gun to my head, directly or indirectly. It's like, if you don't shut down, we are sending the police over. Okay. And it got to that point. So you have to ask yourself, is the cost worth it, or is it not worth it? And obviously, if the cost is not worth it, if we're going to do what BLM did, and we just said, let's let it go, then again, we're going to end up to the same point. Cost is too high. Just let people do whatever they want. And there's a bad, dangerous virus. Grandma's going to die. And that's the way it is. Sorry. But what if the cost is determined that it is worth it? We are going to vaccinate. We are going to lock down. And it's going to be worth it. It's going to be destroying the economy and all the damage that we have actually done the math. And we've calculated that to save these elderly people with pre-existing medical conditions is worth. We've done the math, and it's totally worth it. And we even added the cost of the enforcement, and it's totally worth it. So now we're going to vaccinate, and we're going to force it. Well, then you have to ask yourself one more question. Are you going to do it fast, or are you going to do it slow? For example, we rushed lots of vaccines to market. The dengue fever in the Philippines was rushed to market. This thing killed so many kids that there's so many moms that started parking themselves outside of Congress with the picture of their dead kid that the average Filipino started saying, you know, the governor started like, dude, we didn't have this problem last year. What's going on? And after hundreds of thousands of people reported sicknesses and disease, they said, okay. The vaccine is not mandatory unless you've had dengue fever before. Think of that. So basically, the vaccine is only recommended to people who have had dengue fever before. Basically, that means that you're immune to it. The vaccine is only recommended for people who are immune to dengue fever, in which case, why am I taking the vaccine? And of course, they removed the law a couple of years later. They undid it, and now they specifically ask you when you go get the shot, they're like, hey, have you ever had dengue fever before? Yeah, so you're immune to it. Yeah, okay. And then they hope that you don't croak. What about Russia? Notice, Russia rushed to the vaccine. They got there before we did. They called it Sputnik because they got to the moon before we did. Now, of course, our American doctors are telling us that taking the vaccine from Russia would be the equivalent of Russian roulette because they got it there too fast. It's dangerous. They haven't tested it properly. They didn't go through enough trials and vaccination studies. They got to it by September, and there's no way that a safe vaccine could come out that fast. Ours, which is going to come out 3 months later, in November, ours is going to be safe. The Russian one is not safe, but the American one or the European one or the other one is safe. We have friends in the Middle East, high up in the government, in the healthcare system. And they said, hey, we're working on a vaccine. We're close. I think we're going to be coming in line in about January or December. But he goes, hey, I got, I'm telling you, make sure you don't take batch number 1 or batch number 2 because you want to take batch number 3. I go, why is that? He goes, because batch number 1, we're going to send that to the Pakistanis. And batch number 2, we're going to send it to the Africans. And after we see how many of them die, then we will authorize the injection for our people. So he said, make sure. He was pro-vaccine. He wasn't a conspiracy nut. He thought the virus was real. He thought it was naturally occurring. He thought it was contagious. He thought we know how and everything. His recommendation was get the 3rd or 4th batch. Do not be the first in line to get your shot, because that is reserved for the Africans and for the Indians. And once we use them as guinea pigs, then us Westerners will come in and save the day with vaccine number 3. So then ask yourself, if you are so stupid to get this shot, at least, don't be the first guy in line. Take this guy's advice and be number 3. A guy that came in with a mask, he's all afraid, came in, and I asked him, hey, so what statistics would you have to see to prove to you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that this COVID-19 is totally nonsense? I asked him, if I showed you the average lifespan of the US is exactly the same in 2019 and in 2020, would that do it? He goes, no, because I'd have to see total deaths. Okay, then I asked him, if I showed you the average lifespan is exactly the same and the number of total deaths is exactly the same, would that do it? He goes, yeah. If you showed me those statistics, then I would throw away my mask and I would stop voting for the guy that I'm going to vote for. And notice that at the end of the day, the only real statistics that are meaningful and helpful to understand this virus, these are the two statistics that you will never find. These statistics are weeded out faster than a snowball in hell. You cannot find them. You have to hunt them down. They're very incomplete, and they're censored. Our free media is only free if you're preaching this. If you're preaching anything that belongs to this category, it's not free speech. You don't have access to the YouTube channel. You don't have access to Facebook. Even the president, if he says something like, taking this particular drug is very effective because there's a doctor in Texas that has given it to 450 patients and has not lost one. I'm talking about a nebulizer for, it's similar to an asthma drug. Helps you breathe better. He goes, that's what I've been, prednisone, or something. I don't remember the name. But he goes, this drug is very effective. I've had over 400 patients. I haven't lost one. The guy went on the TV to say it. He was immediately banned as, the fact checkers. The fact checkers. Censorship is now being called fact checkers. If you remember in the book 1984, the ministry that went around killing people was the Ministry of Health. The ministry that went around lying to people was called the Ministry of Truth. The Federal Reserve is called the Federal Reserve, even though there's no reserves and it ain't federal. The IRS is called the Internal Revenue Service. It's not internal, it's external. There is no revenue, they take your money, and definitely I'm not being serviced. I don't know about you. But there's irony in the name, and go back to closing it up with put the picture of Moses with the serpent. Isn't it funny that we would use this as the symbol? We take a biblical Mosaic symbol and use that to get the trustworthiness. See, what Satan is doing is he's taking God's ideas, stealing them, and then changing them into his will. But he has to start with an element of truth. The medical system was a godly idea. A lot of the people in the Bible were doctors. Medicine has always been advanced by Mosaic biblical thinkers. That's why there's not a lot of tourism going from the United States to Africa for improved health care. There's not a lot of tourism from the United States to China or to India for improved health care. There is a lot of Indians that come over here for health care. There's a lot of Africans that come over here for health care. There's a tremendous amount of Chinese and Middle Eastern people that that come here for health care. So you go to a Judeo-Christian nation because that's where the doctors actually are thinking straight, and that's where you have a chance of extending your life. But again, you're not going to extend it past this. Because old age is a nasty, nasty virus. That's the serious one, not this. The what?
The secular logos.
The secular logos? Yeah. Oh, those. The American Metal Association is one of them. You know, every pharmacy in Italy, that's literally the logo of, that's the standard logo for healthcare. Now why, if you don't believe in any of this nonsense that Moses wrote, if you don't believe this book is worth anything, why would you use that as a logo? We say, oh, it's a Greek logo. Yeah, and you know where the Greeks got it? From Moses.
Where was that in the Bible, the Moses story?
In the desert, the snakes. No. Numbers. It's during the Exodus. It's after Egypt, and it's before the Promised Land. It's during those 40 years. And remember, something that was a godly idea, something that was a blessing due to unbelief, but something that was a blessing, eventually 600-700 years later, the Jews turned it into a curse, and Hezekiah had to pulverize it. And that's exactly what we need to do. We need to take this thinking here, and we need to pulverize it. This is not medicine. This is medicine falsely so called. This will get you killed. Okay, that's open it up. Got 20 minutes for comments and darts. Ding. Do you guys look at your life as something that's on a timer? There was a movie that they made where, remember? Where you had a clock on your wrist and you could buy time. It was awesome. The rich people, lived longer because they bought time. But at the end of the day, there's a ticking time clock, and literally that's what's going on in your cells. They're ticking away to, okay, yo.
There's a lot of people that think that taking the vaccine is the mark of the beast.
The COVID vaccine? I don't think it's the mark of the beast. I think it's indoctrination into accepting the mark of the beast. For example, if you've done all this damage off of a virus that can't even kill a 113-year-old grandma in Spain, imagine if you cook one up, because the labs are already set up, imagine you cook one up that has a 5% death rate. I'm talking about a real death rate. For example, like HIV. Imagine you cook up something like that. Oh, did you guys know that Fauci was the head guy in charge of the HIV? That's an interesting thing. You should really look into that guy. Endorsed by George Bush, head of the CIA. But that's
I
conspiracy.
read that they were using the same tests, the PCR test or something. It's the same test that they tested for HIV back in the 80s. It's the same test we're testing now for.
Yeah, there's a lot of links between this COVID and this HIV. So going back to your question, I think we are getting prepared for the mark of the beast. For example, I don't think Satan in his wildest dreams would have thought that I cook up a virus that doesn't kill anybody, and I'm going to get every church in the world to shut down within 1 week. I mean, think about that. I think he is surprised on how quick we buckled. I think he is surprised on how quick or how powerful these social media giants, Facebook, because now we get our truth from a centralized source, so we no longer get our news from national sources.
Batch number 1 and 2, is that public, that's going to go out to the other different countries before it comes?
We're talking about the vaccine? Well, this is just the Middle Eastern guys, because the Middle Eastern guys, they treat Africa and India as their janitors. Okay, they got tons of money, so they use them for all low-level work. And testing a vaccine is not something you're going to do with my son. Hey, you do it with your son. Because you give that guy $100 and he'll inject himself with plutonium. When somebody's poor, they don't really have all the options that. Yes?
Does the vaccine change your DNA?
Well, it can. Bill Gates admitted that we are injecting genetically modified organisms into little girls. That's exactly what I think what it does, and it can. They're working on ones that change your DNA where you could scan it electronically. Now that would be a mark of the beast, to the point where now I could be remotely scanned to see if I have this thing injected. By the way, did you notice that the mark, my mom, she was born in Italy 1940-ish, and if you look at Italians of that age, they had a mark on their shoulders where the vaccine came. So vaccines do leave a mark. This vaccine has caused political significance, has moved the world closer to a new world order. This thing has religious significance, military significance, corporate significance, financial implications, political There's so many things that got wrapped up into this vaccine that I think Satan's figured out, this is the best thing ever. I got to get my labs working overtime, and I got to find a virus that actually does kill people, because now everybody's trained. Could you imagine how fast we can mobilize into a complete world global lockdown now that this fear and element has been created? So I don't think this is the mark of the beast. I think it's the beginning of birth pangs. Yo.
I personally struggle understanding the winners and the losers in this whole pandemic. The losers is pretty obvious, but the winners, from my perspective, isn't that obvious. Because I try to understand what nation is benefiting from it, and it's like
no nation.
No nation. Not even the United Nations. I believe, or at least I personally see the United Nations as just an organization, an inefficient global organization that is used by the largest funders to promote their own political agenda.
But has their power increased or decreased because of COVID?
I'm sure it's increased, but
that's who came out ahead. National sovereignty has decreased. Literally, Trump, nobody even cared about him. We were listening to Fauci, and whatever Fauci said was being dictated by the CDC and the UN, and that was what was being dedicated to the whole world. Did you ever wonder who's behind the who? You should check who's behind the who. Interesting name. Who's the who? Who? Yeah.
But Robert, the medical industry is also another clear winner to a certain degree, you know? So.
And is it the medical industry? Is it your little doctor, dentist on the side corner? That's not the guy who benefited. It's Big Pharma that benefited, which is basically 3 companies. And if you look at who the stockholders are of those 3 companies, you find out, gee, it's not 3 companies. It's actually only 1 company. The same guys who sold their stock on February 18th and bought it on March 18th. Gee, what a lucky guy. Lewis.
I just have a statement in that in Orange County, under 20 years of age, 0 deaths under 20 years of age.
Yes, which is of course why we have to shut down our schools, because with statistics like that, our kids are in danger. I mean, when 0 kids have died,
0 deaths.
yes, 0 is.
In the United States, Pacifica set up an interview with Dr. I believe it was Kelly Victory, and she said in the United States, 23 children in the whole United States under the age of 18 have died, and those 23, when she investigated them, all had comorbidities.
Exactly. 100% was another cause.
As a father of a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old, why in the hell would I ever, excuse my language, let my child get a vaccine?
Because you're stupid. That's the only reason that.
You can spin it and congratulate yourself on your efforts.
Well, you know what? Because you're stupid, you're going to sell it that I love my child. This is safe. Therefore, I want my child to be safe. Therefore, I'm going to inject in the. It's because you're stupid. It's evil.
The reason why there's no deaths is because we've locked down and stayed out of school. That's what saved the kids.
I've heard that one. The reason why there's no deaths is because we've done all this. I go, well, great. If there were no deaths, now because of all this, now we're really going to start getting some deaths. Because when you move 332 million people into poverty, I assure you there's going to be people in Africa and South America and in India that aren't going to be eating tonight. And you know what starvation does to your immune system? It's not good.
Yeah, they say 1/3 of COVID deaths in Colombia are starvation because it's such a poor country. So my mom that was just there, she says there's people dead on the street, just homeless people that normally get some food.
Who cares about the homeless people? Just scoop them up and move them out of the way.
On the streets.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people dead on the streets.
Yeah, who cares about the homeless people? What's important is that our abortion clinics and our marijuana facilities and our liquor stores stayed open. That's what's important. Those are essential businesses. Feeding that poor guy in Colombia, I don't know him, never saw him. Why would I care? Why would I think about destroying other people's economy? I'm an American. I got enough food in my pantry to last me for months. Why should I care about that Ecuador guy? Toilet paper has been an issue. Yes, that if the Ecuador guy could get some toilet paper, then maybe we could keep him alive.
Back to his question, if it's mandatory to go to school for children to have a vaccine, so then...
Which vaccine? We talking about like a polio one that's been around for 30, 40 years, and at least I can quantify how many kids get killed? Or this new one that's coming online?
The new vaccine comes out, says this is the only way you can...
That is an interesting day.
Because then you're faced, to his point, like you're faced with like, do you send your kid to school?
That's right. That's when you're a Jew in Germany in 1938, and they come up to you and says, you just need to sign a registration. If you're a Jew, you just need to register. And you're like, well, nobody else has to register. Yeah, but you got to register. Are you going to register? You say, well, okay, I'll register. What's the big deal? Well, then 6 months later, you get a little notice saying you have to wear a little yellow patch. And you're going to be like, well, what if I don't wear the yellow patch? Well, then you have to shut down your business. You can't buy or sell. And you're like, well, okay, starvation, yellow patch, then you wear the patch. And then 6 months later, it's you can't stay outside past 6 o'clock, a little curfew. It's for your safety. It's always for your safety. So the Jewish guy was told that if you went outside, there's some big, bad, crazy Nazi people that are going to hurt you. So we need to keep you safe. In order to keep you safe, you need to stay home up until 6 and wear your patch. Otherwise, you can't buy or sell. And then 6 months later is, you know what? It's getting more and more difficult to keep you safe inside your own home. We need to move you all in one little area of town. And we're going to keep you all together. That way you're stronger. United we stand. And we put them in a concentration camp with the patch, with the registration. We called it a ghetto. Did you see at what point, if I could go back, if I was that Jewish guy who got carted over on the train, if I could go back, where would I have put up my fight? If you were a church that said, wow, this is totally nonsense, I should have never have shut down, when should you have fought this? Back in March when you had tons of cash? Or now in September where you got no money, without a PPP loan, or you can't even keep the lights on, you cannot even hire an attorney, you cannot fight. So the answer to your question is, once you see where this is going, once you see that this has got nothing to do with the virus, it's got nothing to do with health and safety, this is political, you have to fight at the earliest stage possible. With all you got.
But then what? Because I feel like that's how, it's not gonna be like something that's like, oh, it's like a choice to do it. Everybody's
It's not.
It's gonna be like, if we don't do this, then such and such, it doesn't make any sense, so we do it. You know what I'm saying?
But it's because they put a gun to my head, I fought and I lost, which is exactly what happened. Your business got shut down. Mine got shut down. His got shut down. We didn't shut it down by force. We kicked and screamed and we gave it our all. However, our churches back in March, they just volunteered. They held up the strength of a wet noodle. I mean, think about it. Chuck Smith is turning in his grave right now. I bet you if Chuck Smith was alive, this would have never been able to be pulled off with the Calvary Chapels. He would have said, this is nonsense. How many times have we heard in church, the day the government comes into my office and tells me that I can no longer have church and sing praises to my Lord, on that day, we're going to put up some civil disobedience. Really? There's a virus. Okay. Shut it down.
My people, the Orthodox Jews, never shut down. And you got them on the news. Oh, the Jews are dousing in a synagogue, and then they didn't care. And they had machine guns outside the synagogue, and no cops came.
And that's why we don't like the Jews. There's the picture that you sent me today. There's somebody put up a poster in L.A. that the Jews want a race war. Remember, the Jews are always at the top of the food chain, good and bad, by the way. Okay, because a lot of the people who are promoting these causes are actually Jewish. On this side, the number one promoters are Jewish. But guess what? The people who are the number one promoting this side are also Jewish. They're just at the tip of the spear. They're the best of the best. They're the worst of the worst. They're like a microcosm of humanity. You know, they're like the Michael Jordan of basketball players. Doesn't mean that they're all good. Doesn't mean they're all bad. But they are at the front of every single battle. Yes.
Where would you say this all fits in prophecy, or would we find this event happening on the globe in Daniel or Revelation, or where are we on that timeline?
You are right here. We are 6,000 years into human history. You're right about to start the 1,000-year millennium. And we are at the end of the 6,000 year, right there, 2020. Now, Jesus left the planet in 30 AD. You add 2,000 years to that, you get to 2030. And this is always plus or minus 5-10 years. You don't know for sure. God has scrambled the calendar, so nobody really knows the day or the hour. But we do know the season. We do know that Israel has been reestablished as a nation in 1948. Isn't that interesting? Abraham was born 1,948 years from Adam. Abraham's birthday is 1948 from the first Adam. Well, guess what the nation of Israel's birthday is? 1948 from Anno Domini. From the day of our Lord, 1948 years later, you get the Abrahamic promise of the land back on the table. So where are we on prophecy? Uses right here. We are 10, 20, 30 years away from a global new world order forming. That one guy is going to be sitting on the top of it. We call him the Antichrist. The world is going to be calling him the Messiah. The world is going to be calling him Jesus. The world is going to be calling him the Redeemer. The world is going to be calling him the greatest thing that ever happened since apple pie. That's what's next. And we're creating his position. See, what COVID has done, it's created a desire in our hearts for a global doctor. What global warming does is it creates a desire in the whole world's heart for a global healer of the environment. Because we can't have one guy cutting off a tree and one guy driving a Suburban. We need one guy to control the whole thing. So every time you have all these global problems, which are all manufactured, of course you need a global solution. You need a global world leader. So we're building this guy's seat. We're creating his throne. He hasn't sat in it yet because the throne's not built yet. But the throne is being built. The reestablishment of Israel triggers the throne being built. And I think we are 10, 20, 30 years away from handing over authority. Matter of fact, before this COVID thing, I said we're about 50 to 100 years away. There's no way that we'd be so stupid. The church is too strong. There's no way you could shut down the church that fast. And then when I saw, my goodness, because grandma got the flu, we shut down every church in the world. I mean, whew. When I saw how much traction, how much territory Satan has gained in so little time, now I'm recalibrating my estimate to you're 20, 30 years out.
30 years to the 7 year trib.
To the start of the trib, yeah. Basically, you have to start rebuilding the temple, and then the Antichrist has to sit in the middle of that temple and proclaim himself to be God. That's when he says, I'm the Messiah. By the way, there are Jewish rabbis today saying that we are speaking to the Messiah every day. The expectation of messianic in Israel is off the charts. I'm talking about high-level rabbis, like top 20 rabbis in the world. If you ask them, when was a good time for Messiah to come? They said there was 2 times in human history where it was ripe for the Messiah to come. I'm like, really? When? He goes, one was about 2,000 years ago, right around this time. I'm like, interesting. And what happened? He goes, he didn't come. He missed it. Okay? And what's another good time for him to come? He goes, right around now. Really? Yeah. Right around now. I go, why is that? Because the nations be established, the Jew is back into his homeland, and we could just see the world is in desperate need of a global world leader to establish peace and tranquility for all. Have you seen the peace deal that was established between the United Arab Emirates and Israel? That is a step into the final peace treaty that we've all been saying eventually is going to happen. Peace treaty. There's going to be a man of peace, and then he's going to kill a lot of people through war. So yeah, I've been asking your time, where are we in the prophetic calendar? That's why I started this picture. If you don't have that, take it with you. Humanity, God broke up humanity into 7,000-year intervals. Then we'll have a new heaven and a new earth here. New heaven and new earth. But right now in the prophetic clock, we are here. And everybody should know where we are. Otherwise, you don't know what's going on.
Yeah, Robert, do you believe that the biopharmaceutical industry is incompatible with Christian Judeo values? And if so, why?
No! You cannot say that all of big pharma is evil. I went to the dermatologist, and they cut out a big old lump that was the size of, a grape in the back of my head. And I'm like, you got Novocaine? And she's like, yeah, okay, put that in because I don't want to feel that stuff. So Novocaine is made by big pharma, okay? The entire medicine world is a combination of good and evil. You cannot say that everything about the medical system is bad. I mean, if you break your leg, you like the medical system. The medical system is a fusion of good medicine and perverted medicine. And for example, a good doctor will actually tell you the same things that this guy's telling you. Good medicine has been built on these principles. They never replaced them, they built on them. So your question is, big pharma is a confusion. It's like Amazon. Is Amazon good or bad? Well, it's both. Apple, is it Apple good or bad? It's both. Facebook, YouTube, is it good or bad? It's bad, they edit things, but it's also we've introduced the gospel into countries that we could never smuggle in a Bible, and all of a sudden we email a Bible through the internet. So you see, right now, it's a fusion of good and evil, and it makes it very difficult for you to figure out how to unravel the spaghetti. So when when the doctor tells you should take a shot, why do you think I should take a shot? You got to do some thinking to figure out, is he coming from this way of thinking, or is he coming from this way of thinking? Because if the guy is telling you that having anal sex is actually a good idea, and then he tells you, by the way, shaking hands is not hygienic, maybe we could discount that opinion. Maybe. I'm not a guy. I sell corn dogs for a living. Don't take medical advice from me. But you kind of have to figure it out.
Common sense is just gone. I wanted to make a statement about the whole, so I'm laughing, it's like serious. So everyone's talking about the vaccine, which I think, I don't know, recently there's a declaration that 2,700 evangelical leaders have signed to encourage Christians to stop politicizing the coronavirus and to receive the vaccine.
Oh, we're going to dispense the mark of the beast on Sunday morning from our churches.
Yeah.
Think of what I just said.
And one of them actually Brian Houston from Hillsong in Australia, which is, I'm sure maybe you guys are aware, but they do have awesome worship music, but he came out and like on his Instagram post said something about the vaccine, and I follow like a lot of moms. There's like a community of us that have, anyways, they have kids that have had a lot of health problems, and they got on there and started commenting on his page, and he blocked them all.
Of course,
And I
free
was like,
speech is only free unless it's
it's
not.
just like wolves. So when we talk about the church closing down, and like you said, they're like a noodle, it's kind of like.
In order for the Antichrist to sit and establish his throne, the church has to concede the territory, because the church is very powerful. If through righteousness and prayer, we could actually stop this whole thing from happening. So by definition, in order for Satan to be allowed to have his time on the throne, the church has to be weak. And we are living in a Laodicean church, where we are the lukewarm church, where we get spit out by our Lord. And so it should be no surprise to you that the end of the church age, the end of the 2,000 years of church age, it ends on a downbeat. Why? Because the end of the church age is we set the Antichrist in power. Think of this. The end of the Israeli age is the true Messiah showed up and we put him on a cross and we told him to go home. So after we fired Jesus, tell him to leave, we've basically reestablished Satan's throne for the full 6,000 years. And even though the body of Christ has been active and has changed human history in the last two millenniums, the end of the church age, it ends in a failure. It's not going to work until he comes back, until the leader comes back, until the father who's a son, who's a judge, who's a priest, until the guy who's a lion and a lamb and a king and a servant, until he leads humanity, this will not work. That is, though, what caused the problem to begin with. Humanity says, we will decide what is right and wrong. The knowledge of good and evil belongs to us. And God's like, no, the knowledge of good, you guys don't know what is right and wrong. You just need to accept what I tell you by faith. And until we undo that error, we cannot enter into eternal life. Because there's always a rebellion between the kid and the mom, and the kid wants to do something, and the mom tells him not to, and the kid won't believe it. Dan.
Yeah, I've been struggling at home, just crossing this bridge and making sense of all this with the kids. This is really sophisticated stuff to have that conversation, with young kids. So I was curious, what would you suggest to other parents that have young kids, and you have a certain line of thinking with mom and dad at home, and then it seems like their perception of the world is, the balance of the world is contrary to that. And it could be even their friends, family, peers at school, other family members.
The road to perdition is wide, the road to the truth is narrow. Christianity, Judeo-Christianity, the Israelites, even the Jews within the Israelites, there was some that were good and some that were bad. The good has always been in a minority. Unfortunately, at least for this 6,000 year period, good people are in the minority. The first thing you have to teach your kid is that if you want to be part of the majority, it's always going to be wrong pretty much on every topic. You need to teach them to be swimmers. They need to be taught to swim upstream, and that's not going to make them popular. That's going to hurt. Eventually, you get a 2x4 from upriver that smacks you in the head. Yes, it's painful, but until Jesus comes back and takes control of the planet, we have to swim upstream by definition. So if your kid loves life, if your kid loves Lord, if your kid is a loving individual, he will eventually figure out that the world is headed in the wrong direction. And he has to go counterculture. He has to see that. He has to see that in you, and he's got to see that in your wife. If he sees you and your wife going with the flow and everything, and then you show up and say, but don't vaccinate, the kid's like, why not? We go with the flow and everything else. We listen to the music the world wants me to listen to. We watch the movies the world wants me to listen to. We believe and act and behave like everything the world has. But on one issue, you're going to take a stand? He's not going to go for it. He's going to go. See, I was making fun of the guy in Ecuador that's starving, or the guys in India that are going to be used as guinea pigs in Africa. Why? Because in essence, one of the ingredients that you need in order to do this is you have to be unloving. You have to be selfish. If everybody actually thought about the other guy's paycheck, the lady that's cutting hair who does not have a paycheck, notice she's not the one who voted for these draconian measures. Newsom just got a gnarly $3 million home. His paycheck has not dropped. Fauci's paycheck has not dropped. All the people that are promoting this thing are being heavily compensated. But if you were loving and actually cared about the other people that are being hurt by what you're proposing, you would actually sit down and say, well, wait a minute. I have to think of that poor guy in Ecuador who's going to be starving tomorrow. And if you did that, this whole crisis would end. You have to, the answer to your question is you be loving, your wife be loving, and then your kid will be loving. If your kid is loving, he will be countercultural. It's just a matter of time. If he's going to be selfish and if he cares, all he cares about is maximizing his pleasure and minimizing his pain, he will not be countercultural and he will not inherit eternal life. Because eternal life is strictly for people who want it, and it's strictly for people that will admit that the last 6,000 years of human history have not been good, they've been evil. And they have to reject this world. In order to get this world, you have to reject this world. If you love this world, if you are of this, we're supposed to be of the world but not of it. But if you're of it, if you like it, we have people that are perfectly happy with dying. For example, a secular humanist friend of mine, they're like, you know what, if I die at 85 years old, I'm perfectly happy with that, as long as I'm healthy till the very last day. His fear in life is, getting stuck in a wheelchair. But the idea of ceasing to exist at 85 years old, he was perfectly happy with. Now, to me, that's absolutely frightening. The idea of ceasing to exist, not getting eternal life, not getting an extension. The guy who loved me enough to create me, to be so dead set against me, to not give me an extension of eternal life, I would look at that as a humongous failure of epic proportions. And yet, this gentleman was perfectly satisfied with not being saved. And that's why he didn't have to admit that he needed a Savior. Why should I admit needing a Savior? I don't need to be saved. I'm perfectly happy with dying. Well, you know what? Wish granted. You ain't going to get eternal life. So, when your kid loves life, when your kid loves others, he will be drawn to the character of Jesus Christ. He's just going to be drawn to him.
It's hard to have him make that distinction in the balance of this overwhelming, the narrative. He's just getting this con job snowed over by the fear of death. And the immediate knee-jerk reaction and intuitive reaction is, in order to be loving, I want to keep people out of harm's way and not...
They've spun it around that if you're loving, you wear a mask. If you're loving, you're going to vaccinate and isolate.
You're trying to rationalize with somebody who may not have the tools to get it.
Then you got to unravel the spaghetti, because this is a ball of spaghetti.
I think that's the problem for even like us though, like I think tangibly for kids, but also like the other side of this is all doing what they're doing and feeling what they're doing about the church, and because they think they're being loving. Like they're saying, oh, we should just shut down, or oh, we should wear our masks, or we shouldn't be meeting on the beach in large groups because...
The Germans that isolated those Jews in Germany in 1938, you think they were being selfish? They thought they were being loving. All evil is always done.
But I mean, like for Christians, like relating to other Christians, because I've experienced that like in my own small circles, like I have friends that literally are in church all the time, think they're being loving by following a certain way that their church is preaching, in a sense of this is a short period of time, this isn't really oppression, we're just having to sit at home and watch church, yada, yada, yada. And they've completely missed the point of the realities that we're talking about, right? And so I think for us even, like, how do you combat that? What do you do in a sense of being loving on this end and in addressing that with somebody who thinks they're being loving and we're not being loving if we're saying we're not going to follow those things,
Our weapon is preaching. That's all we're really authorized to do. God did not authorize us to start shooting people. For 2,000 years, the church has been authorized to yap. That's all we are, is we're yappers. So that's what we're doing tonight. We're talking. We share information. We don't fight with swords. We fight with books. We try to get people to read the most popular book in human history. We fight with ideas and with words. Eventually, we're going to fight with force. Eventually, this battle will come down to knuckles. Right around here, we're going to get to the bullets flying. But for now, grace is being applied. The law has been temporarily suspended, and there's an invitation to invite the Gentiles to a party, and that's what we have. And God expects you to extend to the same grace that He extended to you, to that dummy that you're wanting to beat the crap out of because he just shut down your business by force. Yes, my fleshly desire is to be violent and to riot and to, people's like, those guys are rioting. How can they do that? I'm like, I understand perfectly how they could do that. My only question is, why aren't more people rioting? I mean, somebody coming up to your business and shutting you down, why would you not want to? There's a natural fleshly desire to riot. Makes perfect sense. But we're not talking about. We're taught to take it, be patient. Eventually, they're going to start chopping our heads off. They're going to you think, oh my God, my video on YouTube got censored. Oh, that's freaking you out. You know what they did to the Jews in our times that preached the gospel? Are you kidding? We're eventually going to be getting our heads chopped off. The censorship is going to be escalating. It's going to go through the roof. It's not going to get any better. It's going to get worse before it gets better.
Just a really quick comment. Did you see the guillotine that was brought out by the protesters in Portland last night?
No, but that's what they're trying to do. What? That they're the new French Revolution? Well, guess whose head is going to be in that guillotine? It's these anti-vaxxers that are anti-safety. They're not wearing face masks. What do we call them, Beth? The underperformers, because we don't perform properly. They tell us to wear a mask. We don't wear a mask. Tell us to get a shot, we don't get a shot. They tell us to teach our kids that they could choose their gender, and we don't tell our kids they could choose their gender. We tell them, look in your pants and just go with what's there. We're all confused. But they think we're confused, we think they're confused. Somebody's right, somebody's wrong. How do you prepare for what's coming? Love God, love others. Get these ideas, anything that tells you there's not going to be any pain, there's going to be a pre-trib rapture, you're not going to be here when the going gets tough, don't worry about it, you're going to be gone. Get all those philosophies out of your hair and get ready for a fight. Because there's never been a church in human history that hasn't been succumbed or put under pressure or squeezed. Israel, by definition, I mean, look at it, from the day they started, they were constantly squeezed by all their neighbors. Noah. Add all the heroes. You can't think of one biblical hero that didn't go through a tremendous amount of pressure. So what do? We teach our kids, don't worry, you're not going to see any of this. You're going to get raptured out. That doesn't prepare a guy to fight. Imagine you go to a soldier and says, don't worry, that Normandy thing, you're never going to be there. That's the worst thing you could tell a soldier. You're going to say, dude, we're going to have to go through Normandy. A lot of us are going to get killed, and it's going to be bad. But we know the end of the story. It's going to be worth it. And at the end of the day, so what if you get your head chopped off? Remember, we have this disease that kills 100% of us. So at the very most, they didn't really kill me. They just sped up the process. You know what I mean? I'm 51 years old. I'm supposed to be dead at 78. Do the math. What is that? 16 years? 20? I got 27 years left. You chop my head off in 14 years.
Is there a point where you would physically try to stop something from happening?
Oh, you mean like Peter with slicing the guy's ear off? It's been done, and you've been told, no, we fight with words. We don't fight with weapons. And notice that if the church had fought this fight at the pulpit, we would have won this. This whole thing would have, I think Satan had to wait till Chuck Smith and Chuck Missler and Billy Graham and a lot of these guys had to die. Because if that old wave would have been around, I don't think you could have pulled this off. Could you imagine Chuck Smith saying, hey, we're going to shut down every Calvary chapel tomorrow? What? The churches that are still open, you mean like the 6 of them that we know about? Yeah. I like those guys. Those guys are my heroes. All my tithes have been rediverted to those people, 100%. My local church is starving, but those 6 are doing quite well. They're being blessed by God. What an amazing coincidence. From all over the country, from all over the world. Well, I'm sure that's just a coincidence, though. The synagogues that are opened, they're not all open. Some of them chose to shut down. The same fight is going on in the Jewish world.
The Reform and the Orthodox.
The left and the right. Yeah. The same fight is going on there. Yo.
Follow-up question. So, at what point would you try to defend your life, if anything?
Yeah. He's got his CCW. He's got 19 rounds in that P2 in the P226. He's like, I am not going to waste 19 bullets. Why not to shoot something? For nothing. Okay, when is force authorized during the church age? Police actions. Okay, somebody's breaking into your house. You see someone getting raped. You engage that with force. We're not pacifists. We don't walk by the lady's getting raped and say, oh, we're under the age of grace, so pray harder, lady. We don't do that. We whip out the gun, and we take care of it. We fire 2 warning shots to the chest and 1 to the head. We do that. However, when you're figuring out that we're not wrestling against flesh and blood, it's not a guy that's breaking into your house. We are wrestling against principalities and spiritual wickedness in high places. You ain't going to get Lucifer from sitting on his throne with your little 220 and we're going to stop the New World Order from forming. That's not what's going to do it. As a matter of fact, you're the one who's going to be put on the video and made fun of and used as an example of why guys like you should be killed. See, once you understand the propaganda machine, the last thing you want to do is feed it. Yes.
You have to take my kids or your kids away from your house because they're not vaccinated.
Oh. Okay, so well, okay. This is not a criminal now. This is the police coming in. This is the entire government coming in. So your choice is what? You go down a blaze full of fire, and by the way, your kid's gonna be dead, including you and your wife, basically like the Masada guys. This is the zealots during when the Romans did what they did to Israel. That's what they figured. I'm going to go down fighting. Fine. 3 more dead Jews on the top of Mount Masada. It would have been, at that time, it was time to submit. You're asking a complex question. I think that you're going to get the instructions strictly on God's going to give you that answer at the last minute. This is a battle plan. You don't give all the soldiers all the battle plans. Everybody's on a need-to-know basis only. You understand? So you're asking me, what am I going to do when Normandy hits? I don't know, but God is going to tell me what to do when Normandy hits. He does expect martyrs. We literally have examples of people on the throne complaining to Jesus, when are you coming back? When are you going to avenge me? I got my head chopped off for this. What's going? They're complaining about the delay. These are good heavenly saints.
They'll find a good-hearted doctor that will forge that your kid got the vaccine, or save $5,000 and find a corrupt one and bribe it.
There's your answer. Yeah. By the way, how do you think a lot of Jews got smuggled out of Germany? I'm not a Jew, I'm an Italian. And they found some Italian guy that changed that last name from Steinberg.
For $100,000 would make you Swiss.
Bingo.
For 100,000, whatever it was back then in gold, yeah.
See, if you were a Jew in 1935 and you would see where this is going, if you could foretell where this is going, you could have gone out of Germany from 1930 to 1935. They were actually kicking people. They were motivating you to leave. But you had to have seen it. There's people that are motivating, so it's time to get off the grid. We got to go buy a piece of dirt in the middle of nowhere and get off the grid. You start hearing that from this guy, from that guy, from that guy. It's like, is there some wisdom to that? I don't know. In my heart, I don't feel like getting off the grid. Right now, I feel like getting. I feel like getting to the front line. Leaving the fight at this point seems silly. It's like I used to believe in the pre-trib rapture, and then I stopped believing in the pre-trib rapture because I was talking to a Messianic Jew who said, if the pre-trib rapture is true and we get raptured at the beginning of the 7 years, which is right here, because that means that Israel is going to be defending themselves against the whole world all by themselves. And all their friends, their Gentile friends like us, are gone. So he goes, if I'm going to go to this wedding ceremony with Jesus, I'm going to go and pull his pants and say, hey, Jesus, can I cut out of the party a little early? And can you send me back? Because I have a lot of friends and family that I need to go preach to. You see the way he was thinking? He was not thinking, good thing I'm out of here. I missed all this nonsense. A loving individual is thinking, can you put me back to the front of the line? Uriah. Put me right at the front of the line where the battle's the hottest. I don't care what happens to me. I got people to save. That's the heart of Moses. Moses was willing to trade his salvation for the people. That's the heart of the Apostle Paul. He was willing to trade his salvation for others. The pre-trib rapture guy, all he cares about is the same. You see the guy that's running out of the Adidas store at the riot? That's. Start stealing Gucci purses. It might come down to tonight.
Thoughts on pre-trib and post-trib?
The rapture, pull up 2 Thessalonians, says, do not be deceived. The man of sin needs to be revealed before the great gathering. It literally tells you, don't be deceived. At the end of the days, before I show up, there's going to be an idea going around. And it's going to be a deceptive idea. There's going to be certain people that think that the rapture, the gathering of us in the air, is actually going to happen before the man of sin is revealed. So, Paul, give me the context. Give me verse 1, 2, 3, and 4. So Paul actually tells you, don't fall into it. It's a trap. Why is it a trap? Because when you tell a kid, don't worry, you're going to get raptured. And then all of a sudden, my son is 12. They're advertising the masks. If you tell my son, don't worry, you'll never be punished or tortured or hurt, and then all of a sudden he starts getting punished or tortured or hurt, he's going to say, my dad lied to me. This whole religion is nonsense. If you prepare him for pain, he's going to say, oh, this is what I was told was going to happen. Now it's time to suck it up and to fight. So now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, we're talking about in our gathering together unto him. That's the rapture. Don't think that it's happening anytime soon. Thinking that the day of Christ is at hand, because Paul is writing back here. He's like, dude, we are nowhere close to the rapture. We still need 2,000 years of the age of grace where we have to bring these Gentiles back into the kingdom. I need the word of God to be preached to the whole world. So he's like, don't think that it's going to happen anytime soon. And then he goes, let no man deceive you, meaning that there's going to be lots of people deceiving you to tell you that day shall not come except that there be a falling away first and the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. And what is this guy going to do? He opposes himself above all things that is called God, and that he is worshipped, and that he sits in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. So, can the rapture happen before all this stuff? What does Paul tell us? No. Now, I know that my pastor taught me that, and he showed me the graphs, and he had the chart, and I've studied that for 45 years, until this Messianic Jewish guy told me, if it is a pre-trib rapture, it's really going to bother me because I have a lot of friends and family that I really need to stay here and preach. And then I'm like, holy crap. Yeah, that would make sense.
Well, it's kind of like they'd be left here on their own. Without it. Everyone's gone.
Yeah, makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. On the contrary, if you are going to convert the heart of Israel, when the Israelis see that guys like us are getting our heads chopped off, and they're like, dude, those guys really believe that. And you know what? Those are the only friends we ever had. Isn't it funny that this world government is punishing the only friends we ever had? Could it be that that's actually part of what leads them to repentance? That those drops of blood are seeds that are worth it? But that's why you have...
Like 1 million evangelicals get killed by the Nazis?
Yes. If you look at the category of people that were in the concentration camps, it wasn't just Jews. If you looked at one of the categories, it was called Bibelfugter, Bible researcher. A Bible fanatic was one of the categories that would get you into the concentration camp. So every time you start persecuting the Jews, guess what? True believers and true Christians are right there with them. Why? Because we're supposed to make them jealous to get them to accept their Messiah. That's the plan.
Robert, what about Matthew 24:16 through 20, the command to flee?
Flee Judea. That's the argument that people make to say we have to get off the grid, because if you're a Jew in Jerusalem and you see this guy sitting in that temple professing himself to be God, you're under instructions to get out of Dodge that very minute. Don't go back home. Don't go get your jacket. You're supposed to flee. Get out. Whatever's going to happen here, whatever concentration, just some really bad stuff is going to happen, but you need to get out immediately. We take that verse and we apply it on a global scale, And we say at the same time that the Jews got to evacuate to Judea, maybe we need to evacuate to Montana. I think that's what you're asking, right? Okay, we said the pre-tribulation rapture 7 years before. Why can't it be 7 days before? Doesn't that make a lot more sense? That's 7 days before the coming of Christ. For example, you ever heard of a wedding that lasts for 7 years? But I do know Jewish weddings that last for a week. Matter of fact, that's the standard traditional Jewish wedding. It's a week. So imagine that. You got the husband, you got the wife, they get married, they party, they honeymoon for 7 days, and then they come back to their new home called Earth. They populate and doesn't that make a whole lot more sense? 7 days before, not 7 years. We're one word off. We're one word off. And why did we go with the tribulation here? Because of here? Because what is easier to sell? Don't worry, son, you're going to miss it all. Or, don't worry, son, you're going to get your head chopped off, but don't worry, it'll be right after I get my head chopped off. One's got a lot easier sales pitch than the other. And that's why we chose to defend the Darby dispensational pre-trib rapture. But once you remove all the selfishness and once you start caring for other people, you'll actually say, you know what, I don't want it to be a pre-trib rapture. Even if it is, the first thing I'm going to ask God is, can you send me back? Or can we hurry up with this wedding thing and get back to the planet and help out Israel? Because they're really getting punished. The whole world is whacking them. You think that the persecution that they have in 1945 is bad. During these 7 years, the Jews are going to make World War II look like COVID.
So Robert, what about the Matthew 24, 37 through 41, where it actually talks about the wicked will be basically taken, which is an opposite of that whole rapture thing.
I think she's talking about the verse that says the woman left at the one woman will be taken, the other left. We've been taught that do a search, one is taken, the other left. What's the verse?
Matthew 24, 37 through 41.
Pull that up. We've been taught that it's the good people that get taken out. But actually read the verse again and ask yourself, under the context of what's being said, but as the days of Noah, so shall also the coming of the man be. In the days of Noah, who was left outside? The good guy or the bad guy? And who was taken inside? I totally mucked that up. For as in the days of Noah that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying, giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and not knowing until the flood came and took them all away. Who got taken away? The bad guys or the good guys? The bad guys got taken away. So when we read two women grinding at the wheel and one shall be taken away, which one's getting taken away, the good woman or the bad woman? The bad woman. We're taught that it's the good woman, but it doesn't match the context.
Where are they going? What? I'm so confused.
The bad person shall be taken and the other left. That means that the bad person's going to get whacked and the good person's going to get left behind. This is not the good person being raptured, which is how we're taught. We've reversed it because we haven't read the context. Verse 39 tells you the guys who are getting taken away are the bad people. Just keep it simple.
Verse 42, it shows you where they end up and the birds feed on them.
Right. Let's just finish it off. Watch ye therefore, for you know not what the hour your Lord doth come. And this is God's punishment on the wicked, just like his punishment on the wicked towards the people around Noah.
And then Luke 17, 26 points out that the wicked will be removed.
What? Luke what?
17, 26 through 29.
Jesus simplified it. Just said, love God, love people.
If you do that, you kind of will be fine. And all bad theology kind of goes away when you actually start looking at it from that perspective. By the way, we should add one. The trifecta of secular humanism to solve all problems is isolate, vaccinate, and homogenate. Got to make everybody the same. Okay? Got to homogenate. Men got to be equal to women. We have to make everybody equally poor and miserable.
You write Hebrew now?
Huh?
I didn't know you wrote Hebrew now.
Isolate, vaccinate, homogenate.
So does that have a typo as it was in the days of Noah?
No, Noe, that's not a typo. That is another way of spelling Noah.
Oh, are we reading a different version or King James?
This is the King James Version. Most popular book in human history. King James Version, over 1 billion of them in print. That's one for every 7 people on the planet. If you haven't read the book, why haven't you read the book? It's the most popular book, #1 bestseller book in human history. Not the NIV, not the CSV, the authorized version. That's the one you should be reading. For example, this time strain, if you read anything that's based on the Septuagint, this won't add up. You will lose this picture completely because they take Noah's flood and they drop his age by 100. The Septuagint-based manuscripts are completely perverted. This picture disappears completely. So all those people that love the Septuagint and Bibles that are based on the Septuagint, take this picture and throw it in the trash can because only the authorized version and the Hebrew Masoretic text will give you that picture. This is one thing where we and the Jews agree on perfectly, unless you're using the Septuagint, in which case that picture gets destroyed. That's a complicated subject.
Can we try the New King James Version?
The New King James Version is good only where it agrees with the King James Version. Other than that, throw it away. And why? Because in order for you to get a copyright, in today's, you have to prove to the U.S. government that your work is substantially different than the old work. So they actually had to make changes for no reason whatsoever, strictly to get a copyright, and that's why they ruined it. Otherwise, it would have been a good translation. But once they were forced to get a copyright because of the cash, you had to prove to a panel of lawyers, Jewish lawyers, that the work was substantially different than the authorized version. Otherwise, they wouldn't grant the copyright. And once you do that, by the way, that cements the idea that you will never have another good English translation on the planet. Because in order to get, unless it's not copyrighted, but if you want to get paid and you want to get a copyright, you have to actually prove that it is different than that one. And once you do that, you end up creating changes out of thin air for no reason whatsoever. Because that's not copyrighted. That's open source, just like the Masoretic Hebrew Bible, not copyrighted, open source.